When the Trinity nuclear test was done, and Robert Oppenheimer said, "We have done this before," he was speaking from an informed perspective. In the ancient Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, there is a reference to a bolt of iron charged with the light of 1,000 suns. It describes radiation sickness. It describes elephants screaming and dying. It describes the shadows that are left on the ground after the blast goes off, all things that we're now very familiar with in the nuclear age. The same culture that described what appeared to be the use of a modern nuclear weapon also was describing things like anti-gravity craft that flew through the air with no sound called vimanas. These craft could pass right through a mountain, and they also used some sort of particle beam weapons. You have human-looking beings that are larger than the rest of us and have blue skin, like Krishna, and they also have extraordinary abilities. And in addition to that, you have weird reptilian beings called Rakshasas, who are also codenamed snakes, and these beings clearly appear to be of a reptilian nature. This even goes to the point that you still to this day have temples in India in which there are people called Nagas who have a human-like top, but then from the waist down they literally have a snake's body. All of this stuff takes on a much different investigative hue once we look at the fact that the actual record of what we now know a nuclear bomb looks and acts like is dutifully recorded in these Hindu scriptures. So Oppenheimer was aware that this weapon unleashed a fury unlike anything we'd ever seen before.
La evidencia nos rodea. El futuro está justo frente a nuestros ojos. No estamos solos. Nunca lo hemos estado.
We see the remains of humans with elongated skulls all over the world. When you look at Egypt, there are countless depictions of the pharaohs having these weirdly elongated skulls. This includes Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughter Meritaten. In the case of Meritaten, there are multiple granite busts that you can see that were carved of her, in which she clearly has no hair and has this freakishly elongated skull. And remember, this is a culture that was apparently building pyramids at the time that these sculptures were made. The people with the elongated skulls had apparently been keeping their lineage secret and hidden in the Egyptian priesthood. But then remember that Egypt became weak and it was conquered by Rome. What happened when the Romans got in there is that they made a secret agreement with these people in the Egyptian priesthood who still had the elongated skulls, and they created a safe haven for them in the Vatican City. The Library of Alexandria was burned down, but only with a false flag where they burned tax documents and census documents. They took all the good stuff that included books from before they came to Earth and relocated that to the Vatican Library. Then you go across to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and once again you have a pyramid building culture in Mesoamerica with people depicted in their inscriptions who have elongated skulls. And unlike the case of Egypt, with Mesoamerica we now have the added benefit that there are multiple elongated skulls that have been dug up and were not censored, but are actually on display in museums in places like Bolivia. We have the researcher Brian Forster, who is bringing out new examples of elongated skulls, and they are being genetically tested, they're being analyzed, and they have clear physiological differences from the skulls that the rest of us have. These people have very large brains. These weird elongated skulls were also found in a dig in Siberia in a town called Omsk, and the men who dug them up were so afraid that many of them actually started crying and left their jobs and refused to come back. We furthermore see in the case of the Mongolian conquerors that there were reports of them having weird elongated skulls. And most recently, even in Europe, we have found tombs of the nobility, the wealthy people who preserve their bloodlines, such as in France. And they also have this bizarre elongated skull feature. It wasn't until insiders started talking to me that I thought about the fact that in the Vatican, you see people wearing these mitre hats, and those hats would very nicely conceal an elongated skull. These people with elongated skulls would look like us in their faces, and the hat would conceal the only thing that would make them appear to be different. My research also turned up data on an Italian noble family from the 14th century known as the d'Este clan. And the d'Este clan had very close ties to the Vatican. What's so bizarre is when you look at a painting of Prince Leonello d'Este and someone who is either his sister or his wife, the scholars don't really know, they usually call her Princess d'Este. They both have freakishly elongated skulls in this painting. The story gets even more interesting when you trace the descendants of the d'Este clan, the lineage that they left behind. For what you find is that King George I, who began ruling in 1714, was a direct bloodline descendant of these people who obviously had the elongated skulls in the 1400s. And then you find out that a variety of earlier British consorts, meaning nobility, also were direct descendants of the d'Este clan. Then it gets even more outrageous when you discover that the royal families of Norway, Sweden, Spain, and Denmark are all descendants of the same elongated skull d'Este clan. And let's not forget that only recently we found royal tombs in France and other countries in Europe in which the nobility again had these elongated skulls. And if you think this only has to do with divine right of kings and European nobility, you would be wrong. In 1988, an article in the New York Times traced fully 13 out of all of the 40 U.S. presidents at the time as having a direct bloodline connection to European nobility.
On the School Watch tonight, the story of a 7th grader from Salinas who claims to have made a major discovery about President Obama. She and her grandfather say that President Obama is related to all but one U.S. president.
And she found that 42 out of 43 U.S. presidents all had a common ancestor in King John I from England. And this is not just any old king. This is the guy who actually chartered the Magna Carta, which became the defining element that turned into the British Constitution.
Davigno says she spent countless hours on the internet over the summer researching the lineage of our presidents, a project that started with her trying to trace her own family tree.
But I'm the first historian to do all the presidents.
So that's almost all of the U.S. presidents that we've ever had. The bottom line is these people are tracking their lineage, they're tracking their bloodline, and they're making sure that their own people get steered into the positions of the highest power and influence worldwide, including the United States of America.
Che l'apertura degli archivi vaticani per il pontificato di Pio XII avverrà il 2 marzo 2020.
Pope Francis telling the world that in less than 1 year, the secret Vatican archives concerning Pius, the Holocaust, and World War II will be opened. That decision comes after 3 decades of pressure from historians and Jewish organizations who want to learn the truth of how the Vatican responded to Nazism.
That the Germans had actually made treaties with a highly aggressive and highly negative reptilian humanoid race that they've called the Saurians or the Draco. This treaty involved the Nazis actually being given workable technology that is built with our own conventional systems They use a sort of mercury turbine, a type of mercury called red mercury. And then they are actually able to leave the Earth. They had a settlement on the moon, they had a settlement on Mars, and they were doing this stuff as early as 1939, even before World War II actually started. As you can imagine, everybody was thinking he was crazy, but yet these insiders were reporting literally standing there, in which you have 8-foot tall, even 12 to 14 foot tall reptilian extraterrestrials, terrifying in appearance, they smell bad, actually advising the Germans on how to build this stuff in these various bases, including that in Antarctica.
Operation High Jump was an operation commissioned in 1947 that was led by Admiral Richard Byrd. And on the public level, it was said that this was a scientific exploration. But what happened was that this operation was commissioned with 33 ships, 13 aircraft, and 5,000 men. Now, this was not a scientific exploration with that many men and that many ships. What Operation High Jump actually was commissioned for was to go down to Antarctica and basically root out the Nazi installations that they had built pre and during World War II. The DC flyover was an event that occurred over successive weekends in July of 1952 in Washington, D.C. And what had happened was that there was a mass sighting right over the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. There was many lights in the sky. Now, many people believe that this was a UFO or an extraterrestrial incident, but in fact it was not. It was German saucers, German craft that were flying over the Capitol building and essentially forcing the hand of the Americans to accept many of these Nazi scientists into their control structures. When many of these Nazi scientists came into America after World War II in Operation Paperclip, they infiltrated into basically every power structure in the United States, government, media, medical systems, basically everything.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
After World War II, James Forrestal went to Germany to tour many of the research facilities that the Germans had over in Europe, and John F. Kennedy actually accompanied him on those tours. Some believe that Kennedy was actually given information by Forrestal about secret space programs and the UFO phenomenon. And near the end of James Forrestal's career, he was also embroiled in many policy struggles within the United States government. He wanted to disclose the UFO phenomenon and the technologies associated with it. It was said that he committed suicide by jumping out of a high-rise hospital that he was staying in at the time of his death, but of course many people are also believing that he was actually pushed out of the window and in fact assassinated to prevent him from working to disclose these technologies and UFO projects.
You had a really troubled Eisenhower that passed over the torch over to Kennedy, before leaving his famous speech of, beware of the misplaced powers when the industrial military complex, and that only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can protect our future liberties and freedoms. Kennedy, with his background in Office of Naval Intelligence, and documents show that he was aware all the way back to 1942 of operations happening. Kennedy had Allen Dulles as the CIA director, finding the nefarious activities that Allen Dulles was doing, he eventually fired Dulles and was replaced with John McCone. Because Kennedy was trying to look into these activities, Allen Dulles set up an assassination directive that was revealed in what was called the Byrne Memo, one of James Jesus Angleton's memos that they were attempting to try to destroy all. One intelligence operative was able to pull it, basically saying that Lancer, or the code word for JFK, has been looking into our activities. This we must not allow. This group was working with the group that was with the Treaty of 1955. So when Kennedy put forth a top secret document to the CIA director looking into the MJ-12 and CIA operations with the extraterrestrial, he was silenced with an assassination 10 days later. Years went by. By the way, the Warren Commission, which, Kennedy's famous piece of infiltrated monolithic conspiracy and beware of the dangers of secrecy and secret societies. Ironically, the Warren Commission, who said, we have a lone gunman that did this, was all made up of 33rd degree Freemasons. And afterward, the CIA put out a memorandum to its operatives that used the term conspiracy theorists for anybody questioning, and it's used today as a common ploy to discredit people who are questioning the situation.
The closest we ever came to having technologies and the existence of non-terrestrials go public was actually in 1962-63. I'm told through Alliance sources that President Kennedy was indeed going to make some announcements, and also make announcements that he was going to take drastic steps against some of these secret societies that were running the planet. Therefore, they worked through the CIA to have him eliminated. When he was eliminated in a very public way, the cabal came into power in a very public way. They had been controlling things very covertly up until that point, but since then, they have overtly controlled the destiny of the United States.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by two organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The drastic bombing of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company. This is just one small point on the topic of how American businesses funded both sides of World War II. One other treasonous organization worth mentioning is the Union Banking Corporation of New York City. Not only did they finance numerous aspects of Hitler's rise to power, along with actual materials during the war, it was also a Nazi money laundering bank, which was eventually exposed for having millions of dollars of Nazi money in its vaults. The Union Banking Corporation of New York was eventually seized for violations of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Guess who the director and vice president of the Union Bank was? Prescott Bush, the father and grandfather of former U.S. Presidents George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order can emerge, a new era. A new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look for...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret. Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
Bush, were you in the same secret society? I'm sorry, let me answer this question. Excuse me, what are you asking? Whoa. Is anybody watching?
There you go. Yeah. Nope, get him.
Yeah, get him. It's a wrap. That's a wrap.
So he got a big dude on him. About to take him to the fifth.
Yeah, for real. He can play D-line. The only black dude in the room is somebody going to
yeah. He's out. I'm glad it ain't me.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wrap. He got him in the Cobra clutch too. He got him in the Cobra clutch. He got him like this.
But you see people sitting around, man, just videotaping it, you know.
Yale University is 300 years old this year, and were you to visit its campus, you would see that it still has exotic clubhouses, which look like tombs where Yale's legendary secret societies meet.
The videotape provides a grainy glimpse into what appear to be the initiation rituals of a secret society that's been around since 1832, whose members have gone on to be leaders of Wall Street and the White House, the Senate and the Supreme Court. What they captured, they say, was initiates, known as neophytes, being forced to kiss a skull, then members performing a mock killing. Still, Rosenbaum says the tape is a valuable artifact, an extremely rare view into the secret society that groomed the American ruling class for generations. Dan Harris, ABC News, New York.
Some of the, I guess, very well-known elites, names I won't mention, but are on the front lobes of most watching this video, are highly involved not only in some of the slave trade aspects, but are also involved in dealing with non-terrestrials and dealing with organized crime down here on Earth and how it's related to these programs.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. For the record, my name is Mike Ruppert, R-U-P-P-E-R-T. I did bring this information out 18 years ago, and I got shot at and forced out of LAPD because of it. I've been on the record for 18 years nonstop, and I'll be happy to give you, Congressman, anything that I have.
A lot of these elite are running a lot of financial scams, drug programs to raise money for these secret programs that they have going on. And they take full advantage of this access.
What the deep state or the cabal or the New World Order is a small group of very powerful but very psychopathic individuals that have acquired a lot of money, a lot of technology, and a lot of information over the course of centuries.
Definitely your politicians, the older ones, the one that are chair people that command the power, 1%ers, chairman of the boards, those people, that's ones we never know their names, don't know their faces, and they control all the power.
The more you get involved in these societies, the deeper and deeper you go, the more compromised you become. You start to learn more and more of the secret teachings. You have to work really hard for the knowledge. It can take years of time. You keep accessing higher and higher levels of rank, and they keep dropping these little seeds in as you go on. Seeds that start to blossom in your mind and make you think differently. Ultimately, if you go far enough down this road, you will be invited to participate in things like pedophilia and human sacrifice. And if you don't do it, it's the offer you can't refuse. They may actually even kill you. Once you partake in these activities, whether you like them or not, they now have leverage they can use against you. If you ever dare to speak out against this group, they have photographs, they have films, they have the footage that can absolutely ruin your life.
Deze mensen, de meeste daarvan, hadden een Luciferiaans geloof. En dan kan iedereen zeggen, ja, geloof bestaat niet, en God bestaat niet, alles bestaat niet. Nou, voor die mensen was het de waarheid en de werkelijkheid. Hun diende dus iets onstoffelijks. Hun diende wat zij noemden Lucifer. En ik kwam dus ook in die kringen. Alleen ik lachte erom, want het waren voor mij gewoon klanten. Dus ik kwam in wat ze noemden Satanskerken.
Ik wou zeggen, we hebben het nu over het satanisme.
Ja,
oké.
Ik kwam dus in Satanskerken, maar ik kwam zeg maar op route even langs, even buurten. En daar was dan op dat moment een heilige mis, een heilige soort mis. En dat was met blote vrouwen en wat drank en dit en dat. En ik vond het alleen maar leuk. Ik hechtte weinig of geen geloof aan hun geloof. Of ik was er eigenlijk niet eens van overtuigd dat het überhaupt allemaal wat bestond.
Het was meer een schouwspel voor jou.
Ja, ik zag gewoon de donkerte en de slechtheid en de diepte daarvan zit in de mens zelf.
Ja.
Ik koppelde het nog niet zo. Maar ook die kringen verkeerde ik dus in, omdat ja, als gast zeg maar, omdat ik vond het allemaal wel leuk. Al die blote vrouwen en al die dingetjes die daar speelden. Het was het vrije leven. Maar er kwam een moment, toen werd ik dus uitgenodigd, daarom vertel ik dit ook, om mee te gaan doen aan offers in het buitenland. Dat was het breekpunt. Kinderen.
Oké. Dat werd je gevraagd?
Ja, ik kon het niet.
The reason that these elite dark occult societies sacrifice and traffic children, first and foremost, is the energy associated with it. So when a human is in the state of fear and trauma, they release a energy, and this energy can be picked up by essentially negative extraterrestrial beings, negative archonic influences, and they feed off of it. They literally feed off the energetic release of fear and trauma. When these dark groups use children, because a child is not mentally programmed yet as an adult is, they are much more innocent, they're much more connected into their higher selves or into their divine, if you will. The trauma that they release is much more potent than using adults. During these ritualistic practices that the elite participate in, one of the compounds that is released in the children's body during torture, during trauma, is a compound called adrenochrome. It's released out of the adrenal gland during highly traumatized incidents, And this adrenochrome acts as essentially a drug.
What is this shit? That stuff makes pure mescaline seem like ginger beer, man. Adrenochrome.
Adrenochrome?
Where'd you get this? Never mind, it's absolutely pure. What kind of monster client have you hooked up with this time? Satanism freak. I think there's only one source for this stuff. The, adrenaline gland from a living human body. I know. The guy didn't have any cash to pay me. He offered me human blood, said it would take me higher than I'd ever been in my life. Why should I fuck with children, he said. They're too small. Some wood.
These secret societies that make up the deep state are nothing new. This actually spans back thousands and thousands of years, and they have always occulted this information for themselves. We need to understand what occulted actually means. Occulted just simply means hidden in Latin. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, it just means hidden. So these secret society groups have hidden or occulted this information for thousands and thousands of years. They've kept it to themselves, and they haven't shared it with anybody outside of their inner circles.
The secret societies are really more of a front organization that they use to recruit people, and they will gradually over time find out exactly how ruthless and bloodthirsty you are. It is only as you go farther and farther into this, you become embedded with your brothers in a brotherhood, you become more and more involved, you get deeper and deeper in, that then they start hitting you with the really heavy stuff. Until we face as a society that these things are actually happening, and that there is a centralized control group that is responsible for this, we will be doomed for these people to continue to exert their control over us. If we don't learn how to respect each other, then we're never going to make any progress. There is corruption, there is rape, there is pedophilia, there is child trafficking, there is human sacrifice, there is cannibalism. And all of these things are happening because there is a hidden elite that actually uses these behaviors as part of their religious sacrament. It actually doesn't matter whether you believe that these people exist or not. The bottom line is that they are actually advertising themselves constantly. They do it in movies. There's a whole set of symbols that you can look for in movies that show their influence. They do it in video games. They do it in television shows. They do it in music videos like crazy. They do it in awards ceremonies. And it's always in your face. Now is the time for us to get our heads out of the sand and understand that even if these things do seem unthinkable to us, there are people today who are actively practicing this. The evidence is voluminous, and really what it boils down to is that people don't want to look at the evidence because it is so upsetting.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?